My husband confessed he loves my sister. My husband, Mark, told me he was in love with my sister, Sarah. I was 8 months pregnant with our first baby, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The world felt like it was spinning. Sarah and I had a really tough childhood. Our mom wasn't there for us, and our stepfather was always mean. I was terrified of him. Sarah always took care of me. She was like a mom and a big sister. She protected me, even when I didn't realize it. I was always looking up to her, trying to be as brave and strong as her. Mark is a lot like Sarah. He's a really kind guy, really smart, and he has the same silly sense of humor as her. They even love the same music, the same books, the same movies. It felt like finding Mark was like finding the male version of my sister. They were so close, it was comforting. It was so important to me, because they were my only family. Mark and I had been together for 6 years, and we got married a year ago. I thought we had the perfect life. I thought I was lucky. I was having a baby, and I had the most amazing husband in the world. I'm glad I had my baby, but that amazing husband? He was a lie. Sarah met her boyfriend, John, a couple of years ago. He was nice to me and Mark, but Mark never really liked him. I asked him about it once. I felt like there was something going on between him and John, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Mark just got flustered and said he didn't think John was good enough for Sarah. He even apologized, but it felt like he was hiding something. The other night, John proposed to Sarah. We were all at her apartment, eating pizza and having beers. John surprised her. He got down on one knee. He pulled out a ring. Sarah was totally shocked, but then she said yes. When we got back home, Mark was acting a little strange. He seemed tipsy, and he said he wasn't tired. He was going to watch TV. I went to bed, but I could hear him crying in the other room. I got up and went back to the living room, to see what was wrong. He was sitting there, all alone, with tears running down his face. He told me that he loved Sarah. He had been in love with her for years, and he couldn't help it. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't stop himself. He promised that he still loved me, and he promised he would be a good husband and a good father to our baby. I was so shocked. I felt like a fool. What was I supposed to do? Should I tell Sarah? Everything had changed. Everything was different. Sarah was my sister, my best friend. But I was supposed to be with Mark, and Mark was supposed to be with me. He was the only person in the whole world who was supposed to love me the way he did. He was my everything. It felt like my whole life was a lie. It felt like Mark had been living a secret life with my sister. I had been so blind. I had thought I knew Mark, but he had been hiding this big secret from me. He had let me live in a world full of make-believe. It hurt, but I knew my biggest problem was our baby. I promised her a better life, a life where she had a loving mom and a loving dad. She was going to grow up with parents who were broken and strangers in her life. It wasn't fair. The next morning, Mark woke up, and he apologized for being so messed up. He told me that he felt like he lost something important and that he was just trying to deal with it. He told me he loved me very much and that he wanted us to be okay. I tried to make sense of it. I asked him if he loved Sarah more than me. He told me it was a different kind of love. He told me that if he had to choose, he would choose me. I knew he was telling the truth, but he couldn't lie to me anymore, and I could see that it hurt him. He said I was beautiful. He told me that I was more attractive than Sarah. It didn't mean anything to me. I needed to know the truth. I had to push him to tell me what he was thinking. I asked him why he had stayed with me all this time. Did he just stay with me so he could be near Sarah? He told me that I was being unfair to him, that he really loved me, he wasn't just pretending. He said he never really had a mom in his life, and maybe Sarah felt like a mother to him. Maybe that's why he loved her, why he felt like he had to be with her. My head was spinning, it was confusing. Maybe he wasn't lying, maybe Sarah was a mother figure to him, someone he could turn to. Maybe it was something harmless. Maybe, but it still hurt. I needed to know for sure. I couldn't ignore what I was feeling. And I needed to know the truth. I asked him if his feelings for Sarah were more than just motherly. I needed him to be honest. I needed to know if he was truly attracted to her. He got uncomfortable, he didn't want to answer. He wanted to know if he loved Sarah. I would make up my own reasons for why. I pushed harder. I needed the truth. I asked if he had ever imagined her while he was intimate with me, with his wife, with me, with us. He tried to act like it was unfair to make me question things. He kept saying that he chose me, and that he wanted us to be together, and that he loved me, but he didn't say anything about his feelings for Sarah. That's when Mark suggested we try couples counseling. It felt like he was looking for any way to get out of telling me what I needed to hear. He tried to change the subject. He wanted to hide. I didn't trust him anymore, but I didn't have any good options. The next night, we had dinner with Sarah and John. Mark wasn't himself. He was really quiet and he barely talked to Sarah. Sarah was happy. She was excited about the wedding and about becoming a mother. She had no idea how much was going on beneath the surface. Before Sarah and John left for their honeymoon, Mark hugged Sarah. He was crying again, tears streaming down his face. He held her hand for a long time and wished her good luck on her trip. He kept saying he was happy for her and her fiancé. He seemed so miserable, so heartbroken, but he didn't say it out loud. I knew Mark loved Sarah. It was written on his face. It was in the way he acted, the way he hugged her, the way he was always looking at her, the way he made sure to say goodbye to her when no one else did. But he wouldn't admit it. He wouldn't say it. He just tried to act like he was being a good brother. On the way home, Mark was silent. He waited until we were back in the house. Then, he told me that he loved me, but that I shouldn't rush into making any big decisions until I had some time to think things through. He didn't say he loved me more. He didn't tell me he didn't love Sarah. He was just trying to keep me in the dark. Mark and I went to counseling. It felt strange, like something that wasn't real. We sat there and talked about what had happened, about how messed up things were, but Mark wouldn't admit it. Mark wanted to keep his confession a secret. He begged me to never tell anyone, but it didn't feel right to me. If he really loved me, and he really wanted to make things work, he had to change. I told him that if he really wanted a chance, if he wanted to stay with me, if he really loved me, he needed to stay away from Sarah. He looked at me like I was crazy. He said it would be hard, because she was my sister. It would be awkward, but I knew he would never agree to really staying away from her. Mark wanted everything to stay the same, even though nothing was going to be the same. He just wanted to keep me in the dark. He didn't want to make any real changes. That night, I told him he was sleeping on the couch. I didn't want him in the same bed with me. Not until he was ready to change. Not until he told me the truth. I needed time, space. I needed to think things over. I needed to figure out what I wanted. After a couple of days, I asked Mark for a separation. I had to see him and talk to him, but I couldn't be around him right now. He was making me sick. He was making me question everything I had ever believed. Mark didn't even try to pretend it wasn't a big deal. He broke down, crying, saying he loved me, and that he wanted to be with me. He said that he had lost everything good, because of one stupid, drunken confession. He was a mess. He even said that maybe we should just move to a different city, get away from all this. We had already been planning to finish fixing up the basement to make it a guest room for visitors. Mark suggested that we have him live down there, because there was a separate entrance and it already had a mini kitchen. I could tell he was thinking of Sarah, even when he was saying something different. He wanted to get away, but he wanted to stay close enough to her, to be able to see her. He was always trying to have it both ways. I knew I couldn't keep it a secret from Sarah anymore. It was my problem. It was my battle, but it wasn't fair to her, to keep all of this from her. She was in love with John. And maybe Mark was right, John wasn't the best guy in the world. But Mark had been acting even worse than John. I was tired of his games, tired of his lies. And Sarah deserved to know what had been going on, even if she didn't want to believe it. I loved Sarah. I had been mad at her. I had been jealous. It had felt unfair, like she had gotten all the good luck, while I got all the bad. She was the perfect sister, while I always felt like I wasn't good enough. But it was all just a big misunderstanding. Sarah was trying to make up for our awful childhood. She wanted to help me and protect me, just like she had always done. I knew that she had the best intentions. It was hard, but I had to forgive her, for everything, for her kindness, for her perfection. I knew it was dangerous to tell her about Mark. He could get violent, but he had hurt her too. She deserved to know the truth, so she could make her own choices. Mark and I tried for a month to make things work. But we weren't working. We were broken. He wouldn't be honest with me. He wouldn't change. He wouldn't let go. And I couldn't be around him. Not right now. We decided to get a divorce. I was shocked to find out that he didn't want anything to do with our daughter. He didn't even want to see her, to know her. That was the final straw. It showed me that he didn't love me. He didn't care about our child. He only loved Sarah. I told Sarah about the divorce. I knew it was the hardest news. She was really sad, and even though she didn't say it, I knew she blamed me. She never questioned Mark, and I didn't think she was ever going to believe any of this. But it wasn't fair to let her pretend. She deserved to know what had been going on. After her honeymoon, Sarah came home. She was so excited. She had such great news. She was pregnant. They were having a baby. She asked me to keep it a secret. I agreed. It was all she had. I had promised Sarah that I would help her get ready for the baby. She was the one who helped me, the one who looked after me. It was my turn, and now that John had proposed to her, she needed a best friend more than ever. She had so much to look forward to. She deserved that happiness, but I didn't feel happy at all. My life was upside down. I felt like I had just been a part of a game, a secret plan, and Mark had left me to figure things out on my own. A few days after, Mark went to a job interview. He had to stay in the new city for a week to find a place to live, to start this new life. The very next day, Sarah and John announced. They were expecting a baby. I felt like I was in a bad dream. Everything was going so perfectly for them. 30 minutes later, Mark called me. He was drunk, and he was sobbing. He screamed at me. He said I was a liar, and that I should have told him about Sarah's pregnancy. He couldn't believe it. He was furious. He said it wasn't fair. He said that John was a loser who didn't deserve Sarah. He was going to have a baby, but he was just a carpenter, a regular guy. Mark kept saying that John wasn't good enough, that he didn't deserve Sarah, and then he turned off his phone. He needed to be alone, he said. He needed some time to figure it all out. I didn't sleep. I was scared and heartbroken. 2 days later, Mark texted me. He told me that he didn't want to be with me, and he didn't want to be a father. He said he couldn't do it. He wasn't strong enough. He wasn't happy. He didn't really apologize. He said he was sorry. But it was like he was sorry for the inconvenience of hurting me. Not really sorry for his choices, for hurting me, for hurting our child. He even said he'd give me the house if I just let him go, if I just let him live his life, the way he wanted. It felt like a betrayal. He didn't love me, he just loved the house. And I was in the way. I tried to call him back. He didn't answer, his phone was off. I didn't know what to do. I felt like everything had been a lie. My whole world was falling apart. Then, Sarah called me. She was worried about Mark. She said he'd called her and asked to meet up. He said he needed to talk to her. He wanted to tell her something that he couldn't say over the phone. He wanted to see her on Monday. I could see she was confused. I had to explain what had been going on. I told Sarah that Mark had confessed that he loved her. He had been in love with her for years. And he might say something even worse. I felt so bad. I felt so terrible for what I had to do. She was coming over later that day with John. I couldn't wait. I had to tell her everything. I couldn't lie to her anymore. I had to show her what had been happening. What he had been saying, the messages he had sent me. It was the only way to keep her safe. She sat down in the living room. Her eyes widened, and tears rolled down her face. She kept saying she was so sorry. She kept trying to hug me. I couldn't stand it. I didn't want her touch. I didn't even want to see her. But it wasn't her fault. It was Mark's fault. It was his mess. I told Sarah that he might tell her he loved her. I told her to be careful. I told her she needed to stay away. I told her what might happen. And I felt so scared for her. She could be in real danger. John sat there, listening, clenching his fists. He hated Mark as much as I did. But there wasn't anything we could do. We were just victims, trapped in this horrible game. I had to be strong. I had to take care of myself. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay near any of them. I needed a fresh start. I was going to move to a small town up north, where my best friend from high school lived. She was married now. It was a good place. It was a safe place. It was a fresh start. It was a way for me and my baby to move forward, to rebuild our life. I was ready to move on. I sent Mark a text message, telling him that I'd told Sarah everything. He called me back. He apologized, but he didn't really mean it. He said he wasn't trying to scare her. He just wanted to say goodbye. He said he wouldn't bother her anymore, if she was scared. He said he wasn't going to hurt her. He didn't even ask how I was. He didn't even ask about the baby. He just talked about moving. He said he was starting his new job in September. He was going to say goodbye before he moved to his new city. It felt like he was just moving on. It felt like he was treating it like a regular breakup. It felt like he was treating it like it wasn't a huge deal. Like he wasn't really sorry for everything he had done. And then, Sarah texted me. She was trying to be nice. She said that she loved me, and that she would stay away. She said that she needed me. She said she would do anything to make it up to me. She was trying to help me. But I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle the lies. I couldn't handle the betrayal. I hated the way she was always so good. I hated how perfect she was. I hated the way she just kept forgiving Mark. Just kept being good to him. I felt so alone, And I felt so angry. I felt so hurt. Mark was leaving, and I was moving on. He wasn't going to be in our lives anymore. He didn't want to be. That's what he'd made very clear. He didn't love me, he didn't care about my baby, and he was only worried about himself. And I was left to deal with everything, with the hurt, with the betrayal, with the chaos, with rebuilding our life from the ground up. But I had to be strong. I had to move forward. I had to take care of my baby. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be fair, but I was going to be strong. I had to be strong.